All right, what is up, everybody? Welcome to the State of the Format Address episode, where I tell you everything that I have learned about this format this week so that you can hopefully win a few more drafts. And usually on the State of the Format Address episodes, I say, let's buckle in, lots of stuff to talk about today. And there is still a lot of stuff to talk about today, but just a little bit less than normal, because this is a bit of a smaller set. The itinerary for today, I want to cover archetypes first. I think that's just kind of the best way to get a big picture overview of the set and what's going on. Then I have some thoughts on the draft aspect of this format, because, it is fairly unique with the whole 2-pick aspect and 4 players per pod. And then lastly today, we'll close things out just by talking about some individual cards, some 2-card interactions, basically just stuff I didn't get to fit in the other 2 sections. All right, let's jump in. So yeah, we're going to start with talking about the archetypes here, and this being a fairly simple format, I think just talking about the archetypes and where the strong ones are, where the weak ones are, kind of does a pretty good job of painting a picture of generally what I think about the format. So we're going to go through all of the archetypes, like the 5 main ones, and also the enemy color ones, because I do have some stuff to talk about with the enemy color decks. But yeah, let's just start with an overview of the 5 main archetypes, and then we'll get into some specifics. We'll kind of deep dive into each of these decks. Green-white is, I would say, inarguably, but not by leaps and bounds, is the best deck in the format. Green-white in webbing / spider synergies. Generally, the cards are just pretty good in green and white. Like, I would say those are the 2 deepest colors in the format. And also the synergy stuff works. So, like, the in-web synergy stuff, the spider synergy stuff, like, those tend to be pretty good things. The reason I say that green-white's not the best deck by leaps and bounds is the next 2 decks below it, blue-black, villainy, conniving stuff, and blue-white modified, I think those are also really good decks. And they probably come together a little bit less often than a good green-white deck. But I think in every pod, there's going to be a good blue-black deck available to be drafted. There's going to be a good blue-white available to be drafted. I guess with green-white, something I felt is, I think in some pods, not every pod definitely, but in some pods, it could even support 2 drafters because white and green are so deep. Where I don't feel exactly the same about blue-black and white-blue. I think if a pod was going to support 2 blue-black or white-blue drafters, it would have to be like a very stacked pod where the packs just happen to have a lot of cards to support those archetypes. Past those 3 decks, I think is where you get into territory where the other decks, green-red and black-red, I don't know that there is a good green-red or black-red deck in every draft pod in this format, right? That's kind of the distinction I'd be making here, where if green-white is like tier 1, blue-black and blue-white are tier 1.5, I'd say that the red decks are like tier 2.5 or 3 to kind of give you a ballpark. Like, one of the problems here, we'll get into it later, is that red is not very good. Red's commons and uncommons, to be honest, are pretty poor. The balance in that department, that is one negative about this set. Red is not unplayable, but there just aren't very many red cards that I want in my deck. And so, yeah, that leads me to a spot where I don't end up in red decks very often. I have to be in a pod where it's very, very open. And the thing is, usually, kind of unfortunately, when there is a weak color, it can sometimes be made up for by there being a lot of good rares in that color. Red doesn't really get good rares, though, either. That said, I have actually had some success with red. Like, 2 of my trophies are red-green decks. And mind you, I think one of them was splashing. But I don't want to make this sound like, oh no, you should never draft red. I just think you should be careful about it. I have no issue with green-red. I kind of just see it as like a fine mid-rangey deck that I end up in sometimes. Black-red, though, this deck, I do think has additional layers of issues. So, it's already starting down power level-wise. Being a red deck, that's not doing it any favors. But it's also a deck that is very finicky and very, like, you got to have the right mix of column A, column B, your discard outlets plus your mayhem cards. That causes issues in the draft because you have to take very specific cards and often weaker cards than what the other decks get to play because they are synergy cards. They're cards that are looking to be greater than the sum of their parts, basically. So yeah, just a lot of finicky things. We'll get into some more details when we talk about red-black in a minute here. But generally, this is kind of how I'm seeing the format, with green-white being the tier 1 deck, the blue decks being the next tier down, kind of tier 1.5 or tier 2, and the red decks, I mean, arguably you could say that green-red is tier 3 and then black-red is tier 4. I think that's a fine way to look at it. But that's kind of, I think, what's going on here. And roughly, that's how often I think you should end up in these decks, right? Like, this isn't a case where it's like, oh, it's week 1, you gotta force green-white. I don't think that's the case. As we'll talk about later with the 2-pick drafting, I think it's very difficult to force a deck in a pod of 4. So I do very much value being in the open lane. And I have, like I mentioned, drafted green-red when I thought it was right. I have not been in a lane so far where I thought, oh man, I'm supposed to be red-black here. I'm just getting super duper hooked up. I don't know if that's an issue of that just like is how the drafts pan out and you just don't, in your average draft, you just don't get a good density of black and red cards. Or it might be the case that people are still trying to draft black-red, trying to make it work. And when people are fighting for it, it's just not going to work at all. Because, like I said, I think some tables can't even support one black-red deck, which is obviously an issue. Okay, and now let's take a little bit of a deeper look at what's going on with these decks. So we're going to start with green-white. And green-white, like I mentioned, one of its strengths is just that it gets a lot of pretty darn good cards. Like the cards in front of me, if you're watching along, there's a lot of cards in front of me. And I'm not going to have this many cards for the other archetypes, or some of the other archetypes. So, yeah, it is just true that green-white is pretty deep. Also, as a deck, I just like what it's doing. So I would describe green-white as like an aggressive deck or assertive deck that scales into the late game pretty well. So just like any other aggressive deck, it can come out swinging. You can have your really sick starts of like turn 1 City Pigeon into turn 2 Janai and Hoppy. That's the green-white 2-drop that has flying on your turn, and then whenever it leaves, you make a 1/1 token. Just put it on a lot of pressure, maybe even in web on turn 3. But if you don't do that, if you don't come off to a blistering explosive start, that's okay, because I think green-white also has the tools to grind into the late game a little bit, play a bit of a longer game, scale its creatures up, maybe get some value by picking up your Gallant Citizens a few times, right? That's the hybrid 2-mana 1/1. When it enters, you draw a card. Let's start with the gold cards first, because I think these are 2 stars of the show. So Janai and Hoppy is what I just mentioned, the 2-mana 2/2 that has flying on your turn, and then when it leaves the battlefield, you make a 1/1 token. Great card, obviously, like good aggressive creature that punishes your opponent for interacting with it. And of course, when you unweb it, you get a 1/1. Nothing to dislike here. Other gold card, also excellent, Alessos and Pros, Acrobatics. This is a 5-mana 4/4 with an web cost of 1 green-white. And whenever you cast a creature spell, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. It gains flying until end of turn. So you can have some really busto starts of just playing this on turn 3, but pretty much at any point in the game, this card is excellent and just like a must-kill creature. So yeah, green-white benefits from having very good gold cards. Also, if you want to talk about kind of gold adjacent cards, the hybrid cards are pretty good too. Gallant Citizen, that's the 2-mana 1/1. When it enters, draw a card. Diligent Webkeepers, this is the 4 Selesnya hybrid, 4/3. When it enters, you put a +1/+1 counter on each other creature you control. It also gets a busted bomb in Eleni Brood Recruiter, which is a 4-mana 3/5 in web for 1 green-white. Whenever you cast a creature spell, you make a 1/1 token, and for 5 mana, you can give your creatures +2/+2 and vigilance until end turn. It's also a spider hero, which matters. The creature types matter here. But yeah, very, very good card, busted card. It's very likely that if you see a Selesnya gold card early on, you should take it. That's a good rule of thumb. Let's talk some of the in-web cards now. So, starting off, bottom of the barrel, but also still not terrible by any means, Darvel, whose web protects. This is 2 and a white for a 3/3 legendary creature at common, and it's got in web for a single white mana. So this card, well, not exciting, doesn't do anything fancy, is kind of just fine. Like, I found 3-mana 3/3 is actually decent stats in this format. Really not a lot of 3-mana 3/3s running around. A lot of 3-mana 2/3s. Very few 2-mana 3/2s that'll trade up with this card. Spider matters, single mana and web matters. So yeah, like not a card I ever take highly, but sometimes I'll just, it just fills up the deck. Sometimes I just want another spider. The green common, though, is pretty good. Zan Tunnel Web Explorer is 4 and a green for a 4/3 legend, and web for 3 mana. When it enters, search your library for a basic, put it on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. Yeah, I found this card to be really good. Like, when you get to unweb it on turn 3, you feel amazing about it, and when you cast on turn 5, okay, maybe not amazing, but you still feel pretty okay about it. I've also been splashing in this format quite a bit more than anticipated. I actually expected this to be a very 2-color, straightforward format, where I splash pretty rarely. Both because I kind of went in with the impression that the fixing wasn't amazing and that there wasn't great cards to splash. But I've kind of found both those things not to be so true. As I've played more and more, I've been splashing more. I splash in like 40-ish% of my decks, I would say. And Zan's one of the better fixers in the format. So yeah, just another nod to Zan being pretty good. And then we get to the 2 monocolored uncommon and web cards, and both these are really good. So first one is Sarn of the Silken Throne. 4 mana for a 3/4 in white, legendary creature. In web for 2 and a white. And at the beginning of your end step, if 2 or more creatures enter the battlefield this turn under your control, you draw a card and gain 2 life. So if you can just do this once, it's great. Like, you really feel great about it. You pick up your City Pigeon on turn 4, you play this, you play your Pigeon, you've done your thing. And I found it to be not very difficult, by the way. And if it sticks around, it's just going to win the game, right? And just, of course, the whole thing of like, well, I'm drawing more cards, which draws me into more creatures, which means I can trigger this more times. So yeah, this is definitely a card that's been a lot better than I expected it to be. And then one that I just expected to be good and is pretty good is the Clutter Cluster. This is 1 into green for a 2/3. In web for 4 green. If it was cast with some web cost, you gain 3 life and make 2/2/1 green spider creature tokens with reach. So very good thing to be able to play on turn 6 if you can in-web it, but also just pretty good on turn 2 as well, because it's a 2-drop that is hard to block, right? So it's an enabler and a payoff as well. It will allow you to, if you play this on turn 2, get your Zan into play on turn 3 a lot more often. All right, let's talk some enablers now. How are you actually getting your creatures tapped? So evasive creatures are obviously a big thing, and City Pigeon is kind of chief among them. Single white mana for a 1/1 flyer. When it leaves the battlefield, you make a food token. This is a good enabler, but I have some thoughts on City Pigeon, actually, that I want to share. So I would have assumed that, you know, with this deck, with the in-webbing deck, it's almost like the Madness deck, where you think about it like column A, column B. I've got my enablers, I've got my payoffs. You know, in this case, I've got my evasive creatures being my enablers, or my creatures that tap themselves, and my payoff is my in-web card. And I would have thought, like, you want to have an equal-ish mix of those cards, right? Enablers and payoffs. And what I found is that the first enabler, your first City Pigeon on the battlefield, your first Leyline Weaver, which is the 2-mana 2/2 reach mana dork, like, those are great. Because the mini game, the little goal that you're trying to achieve in your in-web games often is being able to in-web on turn 3. A lot of the cards have 3 mana in-web costs. And so starting with your first pigeon, like drawing 1 pigeon and 1 Zan or 1 Sarn, that feels like a busted start, like a very, very good start. Or, heaven forbid, City Pigeon into the gold card, right? The 3 mana in-web card. That's great. But you don't really want to draw too many City Pigeons. Like, once you draw your second City Pigeon, that already kind of feels like too many. Or even your second Leyline Weaver, the Mana Dork, which is a really good Mana Dork, but, as often, Mana Dorks have diminishing returns. I think City Pigeons have some diminishing returns. So yeah, try to be nuanced here with this, but, I don't think that this is, a slam dunk. I just want, all the City Pigeons. You send your friend a screenshot with the 5 City Pigeon deck, and you're like, wow, my deck's busted. I actually don't think that's what's going on with City Pigeon. I think what is going on is you want something in the neighborhood of 7 or 8 enablers for your in-web cards. At 7 or 8, you kind of get to the number where the math works out in a way where you're likely to see one in your opening hand. And once you have that number in your deck, around 7 or 8, I really think you want to be focused on more expensive cards, more in-web cards. Yeah, it's basically like City Pigeon and Leyline Weaver. They're very good enablers. The best enablers you can get, I'd say. But there's still a ceiling for the number of enablers. And a mistake that I made drafting this deck early on is just not building up the curve enough. There's some times where your aggressive decks, you just want to be as low to the ground as possible, just as lean as possible. I don't think that's what's going on with green-white. I do think you want to be building with, some 3s, some 4s, some 5s, maybe a 6 in there. It's that kind of aggressive deck, not like a super-duper low-to-the-ground 15 land, that kind of deck. I mean, I could imagine it, I guess. I just haven't had many of my green-white decks look like that. They've been a little more on the side of proactive mid-range rather than pure aggressive. And in that kind of deck, you don't want infinite 1s and 2s. You want just enough so you have a 1 or a 2 on that turn of the game. And as you go on, you keep drawing impactful cards. Going on, other enablers. Leyline Weaver. I'll shout this one out again. I'll read it in full. This is the 1 and a Gruul hybrid 2/2 reach. Taps to add red or green, and whenever you cast a spell with mana value 4 or greater, untap this creature. So it taps itself outside of combat. That's the big joke here. And it enables the turn 3 and web starts. Cruel Caracal is another one that's pretty good at enabling and web on turn 3. This is the 2 mana 2/2 that can pump for 3 mana to give +2/+2. So often your opponent will not be able to or will not want to block this on turn 2 because you've got the threat of activation. So you get this through, pick something up. We also got Basil Cabaretti Loudmouth, which is 2 mana 2/2 uncommon, has flash. When it enters, choose one or both. Tap target creature or untap target creature. So it's a good way to get a creature tapped. Also very funny, Tedfro in my Discord pointed out that Basil can target himself with both abilities. So when you cast him, you can go target, target. He does a little dance. He taps himself, then untaps himself. Do with that information as you will. As we go up the curve is where we start to get into the less good enablers. Because, like I mentioned, you really want to be able to unweb on 3. The other enablers don't allow you to web until a little bit later, which is still fine. You know, it's not the worst thing in the world, but you don't really get that explosive start. So you've got Eccentric Arachnologist, which is the 3-mana, 2/3 mana dork, taps to add a mana of any color. You also pay 3 mana to tap it and put a +1/+1 counter on target spider. Activate that as only as the sorcery, so just like, tap ability. Supported Parents, 3 mana, 3/3 at uncommon. You can tap 2 untapped creatures you control, add 1 mana of any color. And Vine-Woven Chariot, 2 mana, 3/1, crew to a vehicle. You can pay green when it enters, search your library for a basic land, put it into your hand, and shuffle. All 3 of these cards are kind of fine. I never really prioritize them for green-white. If I'm splashing, all 3 of these go up a bit, obviously, because they all help fix your mana. But I'd say these are like the tier 2 of good enablers. Really, you're looking for the 2-drops and the City Pigeon. Also, when you've got a bunch of Gallant Citizens, so this is the 2 mana 1/1 when it enters, draw a card, that's where I might want to play Supportive Parents, Arachnologist, Chariot a little more often, where my goal isn't to be like explosive turn 3 in web, it's to pick up my Gallant Citizens a few times, right, and just like draw a bunch of cards. You can kind of play a bit more of a mid-rangey game. And it's pretty difficult to get Citizen tapped, even though it's one of the best things to pick up because it's 2 mana 1/1. You know, very difficult to get that into combat. And so Parents and Chariots, those are 2 things that can tap your creatures outside of combat. As well as all the web stuff, Green-White also has the theme of caring about spiders, of course. So we'll touch on those cards quickly. All of them pretty good. Zora, Spider Fancier, is a single mana for an 0/2 at uncommon. When another creature enters under your control, you gain a life, and if it's a spider, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Really good, premium uncommon for this deck. You see this card, you snap it up. It's also a 1-drop that can get itself tapped. It's not that likely to get it on turn 2. But if you have one of the cheaper and web cards, like one of the 1-mana ones, it can sort of count as an enabler. But mostly, it just gains you a bunch of life, puts counters on your cards. Rouse the Swarm, kind of similar actually when I look at it. It's a life gain card that also makes your spiders bigger. This is a 4-mana enchantment, comes in with a 2/1 reach token spider. You gain 1 life for each spider you control, and spiders you control get +1/+1 and can't be blocked by creatures with Defender. So another just very good spider payoff. Oris, Last of the Web Lords. This is 5 mana, 3/5 reach. At the beginning of combat in your turn, target spider you control gets +2/+2 until end of turn. And a good rare one is Demera, Soul of the Spider, 1 in a Selesnya hybrid for a 2/2. Whenever a spider you control enters, you draw a card. This triggers only once per turn. So yeah, like as you can see, quite a few reasons to actually want spiders. And I think that's something to keep an eye on when you're drafting green-white. Like you do want to bias towards a spider, obviously if you have these cards, but even in anticipation of seeing them. Darville is a good example, right? The 3 mana 3/3 in white. I will take that card often out of a weakish pack because I'm like, okay, well, it's a spider, so it could really, really matter in my deck, even though it's sort of unexciting otherwise. Last thing to talk about with green-white is its tricks, and it's got some pretty good tricks. So, Lively Leap, single white mana for an instant. Target creature gets +2/+2, gains flying, and if it's a spider, you gain 2 life. And Grow Extra Arms, 2 mana instant, only costs 1 mana if it targets a spider. Target creature gets +4/+4 until end of turn. So yeah, I guess these are also spider payoffs in some way. Lively Leap, the payoff of gaining 2 life is fairly minor, but it matters sometimes. But this trick is just good. Like 2 mana +2/+2 flying, that's a really good rate. Like don't ignore that. Same with Grow Extra Arms. Like this is, I guess, a little more of a green-red card in my mind, where you're like big and tramply. But it's a card I play just fine if I've got 7-8 spiders. 1 mana +4/+4 is a pretty good rate. Should also call out Spectacular Tactics. This card is just fantastic. Like this is the best common in my mind, but very good in this deck. 2 mana instant. Choose one. Either target creature you control gains hexproof and you put a counter on it, or destroy target creature with power 4 or greater. Kind of everything your proactive deck wants. And just before we get to our next deck, if you're enjoying the show, do go check out the Patreon, patreon.com/limitedlevelups. That's where you can go if you want to support any of my content, or you want to get some benefits over there. There's also the Limited Level Ups Discord. That's a free Discord. It's got some benefits for patrons, but if you want to join, links in the description. Great place to talk about limited magic. But yeah, just want to say thank you to everybody who supports every week. Go check it out if you're interested. And let's get back to the show. Okay, swinging things around to blue-black now. So blue-black I kind of see as a halfway point between a tempo deck and a controlling deck. Or maybe more accurately, like that's the range you can be in when you're in this. And like not every single deck is going to be specifically a mix between those two kind of decks. But like you could be more tempo-centric, just trying to end the game. Or you could be more, let me draw into my bombs, let me have all this card draw removal. I think it kind of just depends on what cards you see and what cards you open. I think that without rares, kind of as is often the case, you're going to want to push towards ending the game, cheap flyers, evasive things, And the signposts, which are both pretty good, support that plan. So we'll talk about those. Tyrell Entropic Hunger is the first one. This card is excellent, one of the best uncommons in the set. 2 blue-black for a 3/1 flying lifelink vigilance. And you can exile this card from your graveyard and pay blue-black. Look at the top 3 cards of your library, put one of them to your hand, the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. It's also a villain, by the way. And the other one is Carlo Suave Schemer. 1 blue-black for a 2/3 menace, legend, villain. And whenever another villain you control enters, Carlo connives. So yeah, both these cards are good at just, pecking at the opponent, pressuring the opponent, giving you a little bit of value. And even if your deck is more on the tempo, let's try to get the game over with end of things. You appreciate the value, you appreciate the card filtering, you appreciate the fact that tier dies, you can find another threat off of it. So yeah, don't necessarily think of these as defensive or slow game abilities. So past those gold cards, some really good uncommons here. Vexed Bots is 1 and a blue for a 1/1 artifact creature villain, flyer. Whenever another villain enters the battlefield under your control, you put a +1/+1 counter on this card that triggers only once per turn. So another really, really good threat. We've got Argur Tidal Spinner, 3 mana 2/2, legend. When it enters, bounce target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. Notably not a villain, but just plays very well in this kind of tempo-y space. And another really good uncommon here, Outsmart the Amateur. 3 blue for an instant. Choose one, either draw 3 cards or counter target spell, draw a card. So this is really good in kind of both versions of the deck. Obviously, a draw 3 is very, very good if you're just looking to outcard the opponent. But anytime you can set up early, go like play a threat on 2, play a Vex Bots, play a 3 mana villain, play a 4-drop, and then on turn 5, where you've already got your board, be able to hold up Outsmart and counter something and draw a card. It really feels like that's like the defining moment of a lot of games. The common removal spell this deck gets is really strong. Damning Caress, 4 and a black for a sorcery, costs 2 less to cast if you control a villain, and you destroy target creature, you gain 2 life. This card has really exceeded my expectations. Kind of thought, okay, sorcery speed, that sucks. Sometimes it's going to cost 5 mana, that sucks. But the thing is, it almost never costs 5 mana because there are so many villains. It's one of those situations where you're surprised when one of your creatures isn't a villain, rather than being like, oh, how many villains do I have? It's pretty difficult to end up without a bunch of villains in your blue-black decks. And of course, the life gain is great too, either as a controlling deck or as a tempo deck looking to race. So yeah, I'm not afraid to load up on Damning Caresses. And I guess this is probably a good spot just to talk about removal real quickly. I kind of feel like I usually do about removal these days, where you want 4 or 5 removal spells, and I do put a priority on picking those up. Like, one of the traps that I often fall into early in a format is trying to draft too much synergy and putting a higher priority on creatures and just like utility spells over removal spells, which are kind of boring. Like, I know how good a removal spell is, I don't exactly know how good the certain synergies are. And I was losing a decent amount just because, I didn't have 4 or 5 removal spells. You kind of just want to be in that ballpark no matter what deck you're drafting, but especially for, more controlling blue-black deck if you're there. Let's move on to commons now. So first up, we're talking about 2 commons that are good in either version of the deck, like kind of pull their weights no matter what kind of deck you're drafting. If you're a little more tempo focused, if you're a little more controlling. First one is Phantasmal Vision. This is 1 and a blue for a 1/3 villain. It's got flying and vigilance, and whenever this creature attacks, mill a card. So 1/3 Flying Vigilance is just like a pretty good stat line in this format. Blocks the City Pigeons, blocks a lot of 2-drops, sometimes threatens to eat them. Milling a card matters, just like filling the graveyard with cards that are good to exile from your graveyard. A good handful of those in blue-black. Second one here is Merciless Enforcers, which is 1 and a black for a 2/1 villain with lifelink. And you can pay 3 and a black to have this creature deal 1 damage to each opponent, which of course means drain, right? Because this has lifelink. And, kind of similar thing, like, Pex in, if you can get in a few hits with this, great. If you have to trade it off, that's totally fine. If you're the tempo deck, you really appreciate just the drain ability, because you're like, all right, got them down to 5, now you've got to kill my enforcers or else you die. And, if you're the controlling deck, it's a really good way to stabilize, gain a bunch of life once the board's stalled out. Some interesting stuff going on with blue-black's legendary commons. So, first 2 cards I want to talk about are 2 cards that I expected to never be happy with putting in my deck. But I kept getting beaten by them, and as one does when you get beaten by a card, you try it out. And yeah, I actually think these cards are pretty solid in the tempo version of blue-black, not so much the controlling version. But these are Arola, Hedron Scaler, which is 2 and a blue for a 3/3 flyer. It's a villain. You can exile it from your grave by paying 2 mana to put a +1/+1 counter on something and give it flying until end of turn. And Tethrix, Gift of Malice. This is 4 and a black for a 4/5 Death Touch villain. 3 mana, exile it from your grave, put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature. It gains Death Touch until end of turn. So yeah, both these cards, I mean, the rates on them are not phenomenal. 4 mana 3/3 flyer. I dog on Phantom Monster stat lines all the time, but 4 mana 3/3 flyer with a relevant creature type and does something from the graveyard, like that's good. Tethrix is kind of the same thing. It looks very unimpressive, but like 4/5 Death Touch is almost impossible to deal with in combat. Your opponent generally needs removal to deal with this card. Then when they do, you get a little bit of value. So yeah, I wouldn't shy away from these, especially if you've got a bunch of connive, a bunch of ways to discard, self-mill. They get a little bit better there. Another really interesting one is Wekdu, Midnight Hunter. This is 2 and a black for a 2/2 flash flyer. Villain legend, like a common, of course. And it's got Mayhem for a single black mana. So again, just for the tempo versions of the deck, but a 1 mana 2/2 flyer is really good. Like, that's a really good rate. So if you can find a way to discard this card, usually through conniving is going to be the way that you do this. Yeah, it's a really great card for those tempo versions. And then I actually think either version can play this card comfortably. Ozor, Chronicler of the Collapse. This is 4 and a blue for a 4/5 legendary villain at common. As long as there are 8 or more cards in your graveyard, Ozor has base power and toughness 8/8. And as long as you control another villain, Ozor has hexproof. And like I mentioned, it's very difficult to not have another villain. So this is almost always 5 mana, 4/5 hexproof that threatens to become an 8/8 pretty soon. I found. So yeah, I'm a fan of Ozor. I've played 2 copies before. Been pretty happy. 2 other commons to call out. We've got Mob Lookout, which is the hybrid common, 1 in a blue-black hybrid for an 0/3 villain. When it enters, target creature you control connives. So this is a cheap way to connive if you have, a few Mayhem cards or want cards to go to the graveyard. It holds down the ground while you're pecking it into the air. So it's not anything I go out of my way to pick up, but it's a fine way to fill out the 2-drop slot. And Unstable Experiment. I really like this card. This is 1 and a blue for an instant. Target player draws a card, then up to 1 target creature you control connives. So this is another good way to fill your graveyard. It's another cheap way to discard. If you ever win a combat and draw your card, you feel phenomenal, right? This can lead to 2-for-1s as long as your creature is focused, combat-centric. And then if you start with one of the good blue-black rares, that's what kind of pushes me towards saying, okay, I just want to survive, find this, cast this. That'll win me the game. I'm not going to call them all out here. I'll just have some on screen. But 2 notable ones. Niche Pinnacle Pariah. This is 5 blue-black for a 4/5 villain at Mythic. Other villains you control get +2/+2. And then on your end step, if you have fewer than 8 cards, you draw cards equal to the difference. And your max hand size is 8, by the way. So that's a great way to take over the game. And also Wrench. If you haven't been wrenched just yet, I'm jealous of you. So Wrench is 3 black for a 2/3 villain at rare. When it enters, you basically double Gonti them. You look at the top 9 cards of their library, exile 2 of them, and you can cast those cards for as long as they remain exiled. So yeah, this card is really good. Very good if you can recur it. And if you are in this kind of later game version of the deck, you're looking for some card advantage, because there's actually not a ton of card advantage in this format. It's not a super card draw heavy format. One of the cards I like is Eerie Gravestone. 2 mana artifact, comes in, draws a card. You can pay 2 mana, sack it, mill 4, and then you can put a creature that you milled from among those 4 into your hand. So pretty good card advantage card that also fills the grave for your cards that care about that. Blue-White Modified up next. So this is kind of a mix of the white aggro stuff we talked about in Green-White and the blue tempo-y stuff in Blue-Black. It's kind of just mashed together with a few cards that care about modified creatures. So one of the stars at common here, by the way, Sam Pratt of Rough Drafts, his first episode of the format was a deep dive on this card, on Wonder Wheel Aerialist, the card I'm about to talk about, and more broadly, just talking about Blue-White as a deck. So if you want to hear more thoughts on Blue-White, go check that out. But Wonder Weave Aerialist is a hybrid Blue-White 2/2. It's a spider, and it's got Ward 2, and as long as it's modified, which means has a counter on it, is equipped, or is enchanted, it gains flying. So if you can put 1 counter on this card, either through Perfected Pastry, which is 1 mana food that you can pay white mana, sack it, put a counter on something, draw a card, or Zora, Spider Fancier, which is the 1 mana 0/2 that whenever a creature enters, you gain a life, and if it's a spider, you can put a counter on it. Very good friends with the Aerialist. Vision, Phantasmal Vision is another thing that's good to put a counter on, is the 2 mana 1/3 Vigilant Flyer that we talked about for Blue-Black. Something I note about Blue-White is I think it's more of a white deck than a blue deck, and I think I could also say the same is true for the Villain deck. I think that's more of a black deck than a blue deck. I find that blue's creatures are, as is usually the case, not amazing, and so often you're looking to blue for good support spells rather than a creature base, right? So blue-white especially, I think, is very white-centric. Like it's at its core, it's that white aggro core. And, it's a good core. It's, I think, one of the best things to be doing in this format. Let's look at some uncommons. So, Costume Closet is really good. This is 2 mana for an artifact at uncommon. It enters with 2+1/+1 counters on it. You can tap it to move a counter from this to a creature you control. And whenever a modified creature you control leaves the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on this. So yeah, super annoying way to just buff your creatures in a way that isn't easily answerable by removal spells. Also plays pretty nicely within web, of course, right? Because it says when it leaves, not when the creature dies. And yeah, this has been a pleasant surprise. It's another card that plays very nicely with the area list. I would play multiple copies of Costume Closet, as long as I've got some other ways to put counters on cards, or modified cards, which I'm imagining you do. Generous Betty Ray, another pretty good one here. 3 mana 2/3 legend at uncommon. When it enters, put a +1/+1 counter on another target creature. You gotta shout it out, of course. This is not you control, so if you have no other creatures, you have to target your opponent's creature. And whenever Betty attacks, target modified creature you control gains lifelink until end of turn, which is pretty good, right? This is 3 mana for 3/4 worth of stats, and some lifelink along the way. We've got Kuminosu, which is the blue-black gold card, or one of them anyways. 5 mana 4/4 vigilant, that when it enters the battlefield, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, and whenever a modified creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. I like this card quite a bit. We've also got the hybrid uncommon card, Serena Bargain Spinner, which is 3 and a hybrid Azorius for a 3/2 flying on your turn. It's a legendary spider, and when it enters, you search your library for an aura or an equipment, reveal it, put it into your hand, and shuffle. And there's not like infinite auras and equipment running around. Some of the better things to go get, we've got Robotics Mastery, which is a really good aura. 4 and a blue for a flash aura. The enchanted creature gets +2/+2, and you make 2 1/1 flying robot tokens when this enters. There's the blue-white rare, Angler's Shield, which is just a busted equipment. It makes your creatures huge, auto-equips, draws cards, good stuff. Not gonna read the whole thing out. And if you absolutely don't see any other targets, you could play a copy of Hide and Mundanity, which is 2 mana blue aura at common. The enchanted creature is a 1/1 defender, loses all other abilities. I haven't loved this card. This is no Unable to Scream. 2 mana is so much more than 1 mana. But if you need to play it, if you have nothing else to go get with Bargain Spinner, I think that's okay. Touching on the interaction you get in white in this deck, so Spectacular Tactics is spectacular. The 2 mana instant that you can either destroy target creature power 4 or greater, or put a counter on a creature you control and it gains hexproof. Yeah, this card is excellent, everything you want in this deck. And Mouthwing Shroud. I like this card a lot. I mean, it's not a surprising card to like, but this is the Oblivion Ring variant, the 3 mana enchantment. When it comes in, exile something until this leaves. I'm calling this out here because sometimes these cards are really good, like some of the best commons, sometimes it's kind of mid. And often the factor that determines that is how likely is it to get blown up. And there's very few things that blow this up. There's a card or two that punishes it. There's the Selesnya Archivist, which is the 4 mana green 3/3 that can come in and exile an artifact or enchantment. But most of the time, you should just count the thing you've exiled as just dead. It's not coming back. Okay, green-red up next. So the times that I find myself in green-red are generally very, very green-heavy decks. Because if green isn't very open, that means you have to play a lot of red cards. And that's not a good thing to do. So usually what happens, from what I've found, is I'll maybe start green-white and then white's not open. And I'll get past the gold cards in green-red. Those are, by the way, Dreadfang, Loathed by Fans, which is 1 red-green for a star 4 vigilance. That star is equal to the greatest mana value amongst permanents you control. This is also a villain. And Zakao, Predation's Shadow, which is 3 red-red-green-green for a 6/7 villain with Vigilance, Trample, Haste, and whenever it attacks, if you've cast a spell mana value 4 or greater this turn, you draw a card. These are both pretty good. I like these cards quite a bit. I think if your green-red deck is going to succeed, it really needs copies of Leyline Weaver. This is the Gruul Mana Dork. This is exactly the 2 you want to play on 2 every single game. I think an okay stand-in 2 is Galvanized Workforce, the 2 mana 2/2 trample. Whenever you cast a 4 mana value or greater spell, you ping your opponent and you can pay 6 mana to put 2 +1/+1 counters on this card. Activate that only see the sorcery. I would prefer to go Weaver into a good 4 rather than 2 into 3 into 4 start beating down. I think the tools aren't necessarily there to have a consistent beatdown plan in green-red. I think you do want to be ramping, going big, maybe even splashing more often than not. But if you do need some 2-drops, I think this workforce is fine. Like, one thing you can do with green-red is you can be like a stompy tricks deck. So you've got like grow extra arms, the +4/+4. There's a few more tricks in there that pair nicely with trampoline creatures. So you can do that kind of thing here and there. But I think really you just want to be like Weaver into big thing. I'm overwhelming you with big thing, and just do that as many times as you can. A good big thing, one that I didn't call out with green-white, is Favored Fighter. 4 mana for a 4/4 common in green. When it enters, you make a treasure token, and it can't be blocked by more than 1 creature. Just a really good common 4. Some uncommons for this deck. I like Kazu, Ruthless Rival. This is 6 mana 5/5. It's got first strike on your turn. When it enters, it deals 2 damage to target creature and 2 damage to that creature's controller. Once again, if your opponent has no creatures, you have to target your own creatures. Maybe Kazu with its own ability and ding yourself for 2. Watch out for that. Infernus is a card I like. This is the 3 mana 0/0 that has +1/+1 for each mountain you control. And whenever it enters, you can search your library for a mountain, put it on the battlefield, and with his leaves, you sack a land. It's a little bit tricky because, again, you don't want that many red cards in your deck, which means that you don't want to be like in a deck that's really optimizing Infernus, because you could be a mono red deck and this card would be busted good, right? Most of the time, though, you're going to be like, close-ish to 50-50. Hopefully no more than that. But even then, I think the card's pretty good. Like, if you can cast this as a 3/3, right? Like, you've got 2 mountains and it becomes a 3/3. It's ramped you. It's card advantage for as long as it sticks on the battlefield. I still think it's pretty good, even if you're not super duper heavy red. Restless Razorkin, another one I like. 3 mana 3/3 trample. Whenever you cast a mana value 4 or greater spell, exile the top card of your library. You can play that card until you exile another card with the Razorkin. And a rare I want to call out here that looks pretty bad, but it's actually really good. It's actually one of the better rares. Cheering Crowd, 1 in a Gruul hybrid for a 2/2. At the beginning of each player's first main phase, that player can put a counter on Cheering Crowd. If they do, they add colorless for each counter on it. So it seems like a really bad card at first glance. Like, you're giving your opponent mana, and they get the first crack at the mana. That seems bad, right? But the thing is, I've really been in a lot of spots. Like, I've faced this card a lot. I've played with it a lot. My opponent plays this on turn 2. I don't want to make mana. Like, there's some spots where I go, okay, I could make mana for them, put a counter on their creature, and maybe I could cast something else. But there's some spots where I'm just like, oh, I just, like, don't have anything to do with the mana this turn. So it's actually not a good thing to do at all. And I think even when it does look like it's a pretty good thing to do, like, okay, I've got a 4-drop I could play on turn 3 here. I've been really hesitant to do it, because then your opponent has a 3/3 that will grow into a 4/4. And not only does it grow into a 4/4 in their turn, but they get 2 mana. Right, as opposed to 1. So I actually think this card, more often than not, is just like 2 mana, gets a counter each turn, you make 1 and 2 and 3 mana. And when it's not that, okay, sure, maybe your opponent makes another mana, and they get to double spell on that turn, and they kill your crowd even, like they shock it or something. I guess shock wouldn't work, but you know what I mean. They kill it after they've gotten mana out of it. Okay, that's the fail case, but the upside in this card is just like a 2 that just keeps growing and making mana is so good. So yeah. Do not overlook Cheering Crowd. And then we get to Black-Red. So I've drafted Black-Red. I haven't trophied with it yet. The trophies that I saw on 17 lands, just out of curiosity looking, they all looked busted. Like, they looked like definitely they were really Black-Red drafter at the table, and they got good rares. And, maybe they weren't even playing that many, like, Mayhem synergy pieces. They were just playing the good black cards and a few red cards here and there. And so, this is to say that this is not impossible to do, right? It's not a terrible idea to draft a red-black deck. I just think you shouldn't go all in going like, oh, I'm the Mayhem deck. Here are some discard outlets. Here are some Mayhem cards. So in the past, kind of historically, Madness decks, which are just Mayhem decks with a different name, they've got this issue. They've got this issue of Feast or Famine, where you draw your sick curve of like, my 1-drop enabler, my 1-drop discard outlet into like 2-drop Madness card. I play a giant thing ahead of schedule. I do it again on turn 3. Like, when you have those draws, your deck feels great, right? But the problem is that when you don't have those draws, your deck is sub-functional. And in other formats where Madness has been a pretty good deck, you're kind of okay accepting the not-so-great draws that your deck can have, because the excellent draws, like the ceiling of your deck, are just busted, right? I think the problem with Madness in this format, one of them anyways, is that equation is lopsided, right? Where too often your deck is sub-functional or just doesn't quite do enough. And the highs, the super high highs, they don't come often enough. So the real sick thing to do at the below rare level anyways is play like a 1 or 2 mana discard outlet, which Mind you, I think there's only 2 of them, being Skittering Kitten, the 1 mana 1/1 haste that you can sack to discard a card or draw a card, and Knife Trick. This is the 1 mana hybrid sorcery that deals 3, and you can either discard a card or pay 2 as an additional cost. And I guess the Kitten really is the only one that you really care about, because this is how you get a turn 3 sick Mayhem turn. But the best thing I think you can do is Kitten into Lava-Born Goblins, which is 5 mana, 5/4 haste, Mayhem for 3 mana. This card is great. This card is very strong. And I've actually played this card before without any discard outlets in like a red-green deck. If you can haste this out on turn 3, that is your ceiling. The non-rare ceiling anyways. When you don't do this, your deck is probably going to be underpowered or not resilient enough or have some other problem. There are a few rares that are also really good. So you've got Ruzik, Booed but Victorious. This is 1 Hybrid Rakdos for a 5/4, Mayhem for 3 mana. At the beginning of your upkeep, discard a card, then create a treasure token. This kind of card would actually solve a lot for this deck. Like, one of the things that there isn't a lot of, and this is one of the only ones, if not the only one, is a Mayhem card, or a card that goes in this deck that's both an enabler and a payoff. That would really grease the wheels on having to draw the right ends of your deck, right? If some of your cards are free bingo spaces, it makes things a lot easier. But yeah, this card is very strong. I actually did first pick this card in my last draft and try to build a deck around it. The deck only went 2/2, but when I got to do my thing, it was great. And Deserek's Gift of Servitude, which is a 2 black-red 4/3 trample, Mayhem for 2 mana. When it enters, you return target card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard for the battlefield, and it has to attack each turn if able. This is also a very, very good card. If you can get that going. So yeah, those are your great things that you can Mayhem out early, but the issue is so many of the other Mayhem cards just are not very good. They're very feast or famine, where it's like when you get to Mayhem them, okay, you feel pretty good about it, but when you don't Mayhem them, they're actually terrible. As an example, Sadistic String Puller, which is 4 mana for a 4/3, and you can Mayhem it for 2 mana. Okay, 4 mana for a 4/3 is terrible, and 2 mana for a 4/3, that's good. Okay, don't get me wrong. But yeah, it's not quite as good. It's not what you need. It's not as good as you need to make up for the times when the deck doesn't really do its thing. The gold cards are also both very, very focused on, like, you have to be doing the thing for them to be good. Kivney is the 2 mana 2/1 menace with Mayhem for a single mana. When it enters, you can discard a card to put a counter on Kivney. New Insumi is 5 mana 3/3 Death Touch Flyer. When it attacks, you discard a card. Then you draw a card for each card you've discarded this turn. Not only is this, you gotta be doing the thing, but it's also a fairly weak card in general. So, yeah, that's what's kind of going on with Red-Black. I think if you find yourself in Red-Black, just try to draft good cards more than anything else. Try to be heavier black than red, ideally. And don't put too many bad synergy cards in your deck. Those would be my piece of advice for Black-Red. So yeah, those are the main 5 archetypes in this set. We'll have a few words about the enemy decks in a second here. But I wanted to detour just quickly and talk about splashing. Because, like I said, it's something that I didn't expect to do that much, but have been doing a lot. I've got a deck in front of me. This is a very splish-splashy multicolored trophy deck. And yeah, this just isn't the kind of deck that I expect to be drafting with some regularity on week 1. The fixing in this format is pretty good and pretty abundant. Like, drafting this format after drafting Edge of Eternities kind of feels like drafting Dominaria United with how much actual, multicolor fixing there is. So we've got the lands at common, both the tapped lands and Vibrant Cityscape, which is the Evolving Wilds variant. We've also got Favored Fighter, which is the 4 mana 4/4 that makes a treasure. We've got Eccentric Arachnologist, that's the 3 mana dork. We've got Zan, the web creature that goes and gets a land. Vine Woven Chariot, the vehicle that goes and gets a land. Supportive Parents to fix for multicolors. So yeah, it's out there. If you want to splash, you can do it. And I also think it's fairly easy to end up in a deck, like a 2-color deck, where you're just not that happy with your deck at the end of the draft. It's just like, okay, my colors were fairly open. My green-white deck, my colors were fairly open, but I didn't actually end up with that much power. And I don't know, maybe it's just small sample size. Maybe it has something to do with the nature of it being, small set, 4-player draft, 2-pick, whatever it is. I don't know. I've just found myself in this format more often feeling that way than I tend to on week 1. Usually on week 1, I'm like, yeah, nobody knows what the good cards are. Or, fewer people know what the good cards are. I get pretty good decks in week 1. I haven't found that to be the case. Now, it might just be that only the sickos are drafting this set. I could definitely understand that explanation. But in any case, there are a lot of spots where I go, oh, yeah, I would love to add a little more power to my deck. I opened or got past a good rare. So yeah, not like a super deep dive on splashing or anything. Just wanted to kind of call it out. Because if you're anything like me and kind of just went in or drafting the set as if like, yeah, it's a very simple, straightforward 2-color set, you're probably missing some opportunities. Because not only have I splashed a lot, I've seen a lot of my other mythic opponents splashing a lot. Usually I'm splashing in green, but I've also splashed white in my blue-black decks. Notably, there's like 2 really good black-white rares that are worth splashing. And yeah, it's something I've done once in a while. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to call out the color situation before we move on to the enemy stuff. Okay, so enemy color pair time. I don't think all of the enemy color pairs are viable. And I don't think you should be in any of them very often at all. But I do think there's something to be said. So we've got this cycle of rares, 1 for each of the enemy color pairs, plus a mythic in Orzhov. Orzhov gets 2 really good rares. I'll address blue-green just quickly, because this is the one deck that I don't think you should ever really be in, because the rare is not a limited card. This is a constructed card. Drunith, this is the 2-mana 1/1 trample. Then whenever you cast a spell equal to Drunith's power, you copy that spell and put a counter on it. So yeah, it's just a little bit too finicky, too hard to get going. Let's go to black-white, because this is the deck with 2 really good rares. First one is Wither Cocoon Keeper. This is 7 mana, 5 black-white for a 5/5 Vigilant lifelink. When it enters, you can exchange life totals with target opponent. If you lost life this way, draw that many cards. And Cronius, Horizon Splicer, which is 5 mana 4/4. When it enters, exile up to 1 target non-land permanent, up to 1 target non-land permanent card from a graveyard. When this dies, you return those cards to their owner's hand. So both of these are very strong, although they're not huge incentive to be exactly black-white, because they're both very good splashes. I've played both these cards quite a bit. Most times I'm splashing them in like a blue-black deck or something, or splash Cronius in a green-white deck too. And so I don't think these really push you to play black-white. I could imagine a situation where black and white just happen to be super open, like they're just the most open colors, and it's a good option. But you have to kind of consider with all of these enemy color pairs, you give up on synergy between the colors, right? Because the set's just not designed for the white cards and the black cards to play well together. A good example of this is the Vision, the 1/3 Vigilant Flyer in blue for 2 mana. That card doesn't play well with the web slinging stuff. I found that out the hard way in my white-blue decks, right? Because Vigilance does not play well with web slinging. So to be an enemy color pair, more has to be going on than just I opened or got past these rares that put me there. One really valid one, I think, that makes you maybe want to be red-white is the red-white rare, Gloria, which is 1 red-white for a 3/3. Whenever you attack, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, and whenever a modified creature you control deals combat damage to a player, exile the top card of your library, you can cast it this turn. Really great card, by the way. This is almost like a 3-mana version of the blue-white-gold card, but a lot better, because you keep putting counters, and it's 2 mana less, and yeah, just like busted card. And this card is at its best when you play it early, right? So not splashed. I've also splashed this card fairly happily, but I do think you gain something from being a base red-white deck with this card. Red-blue, I think I could say a similar thing for, although I don't think this card's as good. Uharis the Storm Spinner is red-blue for a 2/3 Vigilant double strike. You can only cast this on turn 4 or more. You can't cast this on turn 1, 2, or 3. And at the beginning of your end step, if you've played a land or cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, Uharis deals damage equal to his power to any target. So this card is good, not busted. But I do think I actually have seen blue-red quite a bit, funny enough, because people have drafted it as a blue-red Mayhem deck, where they're using the blue connive spells with the good red Mayhem cards. So maybe that's something to explore. I don't know. I've only seen it a few times, but it's more times than I would have expected. I haven't done it myself, but blue-red madness sounds like something that I'm kind of into exploring. Like, I think the pieces might actually be there. So yeah, something interesting to be said about blue-red. And then black-green. I think that black-green is the one you're going to find yourself in the most often. Because I think black-green's colors actually do synergize somewhat. It's no intricate synergies, it's kind of basic stuff, but I think black-green can be the base of a good multicolor deck. So you get the good black defensive stuff, good black removal. The rare is really good, Braco Heartless Hunter, 1 black-green for a 4/3 trample. Whenever a creature an opponent controls with their greatest power dies, you put a counter on Braco and you draw a card. Yeah, just really strong card. Also, interesting little note is that black-green is the most drafted and most trophying enemy color pair deck if you look on 17 lands. So just a little tidbit there. But yeah, that's my thoughts on the enemy color pairs. Don't think you should end up in them all that often, but good to know about, because once in a while you might want to. Now for some thoughts on the draft portion, because yeah, it's weird. So 2-pick, also 4-player pods. What's going on there? Well, I've kind of found that it's a net negative experience, to be quite honest. I think 8-player drafting single pick is still where it's at. I haven't hated it. It has not been terrible by any means. The 2-pick aspect, let's just talk about that quickly. I've kind of found that to be, it's an interesting wrinkle. You know, it's fun, it's a little bit of a detour, but I haven't found it adds that much to the drafting experience. It's definitely fun to be able to take 2 cards at a time, especially if like your pick 1 pack 1 has 2 busted cards in it, 2 really strong rares. But it does also kind of take something away. And the main thing I think it takes away for me anyways is in an 8-player draft, figuring out what the people around you are in is gradual, right? Like every single pick you make, you're only taking 1 card out of the pack. You take the best card, pick 1 pack 1, pick 2, roughly the same. Pick 3, pick 4, pick 5. You start to get a sense of what's open at the table. Once you get to pick 6, 7, 8, 9, the wheel comes around. You get to lock in that. You have some time for the draft to evolve. You also have some time to make a pick that might not have mattered, right? You don't end up playing the card. I think in 2-pick draft, a lot of that is lost because when you have to chunk your picks in just 2 picks at a time, you don't get to gradually pick up on what everybody else is putting down. You kind of have to have a leap of faith where you're like, all right, well, I'm going to take a white card and a blue card, pack 1, and then next pack, take another one, and then I get to pick 3. I hope there's still blue and white cards because especially in this format, it's pretty difficult to pivot off of what you're doing because not all the color pairs are supported, right? So what this leads to is sort of a predictable pattern as to how the draft is going to play out, or kind of like a playbook where because you have so little time to lock in and make that decision of being like, okay, I'm going to pivot or I'm not going to, or I'm in the right spot or I'm not, pack 1 is often very defining for me. So what happens, and I've got a draft in front of me here where we'll kind of just go through and I'll talk about my thoughts. Pick 1, pack 1, you take the 2 strongest cards in the pack. Maybe you make a concession to like, okay, the 2 strongest cards are a white card and a black card. I don't want to take cards that don't go that well together. I'll take a blue card instead of that black card. A white card and a blue card, right? Because blue-white's the deck. Okay, you might do that. That's what I did here. I first pick Remarkable Readings, which is the rare that enchants a land, makes 3 tokens, and then the land taps to pump your target creature for as many creatures as you control. My other pick was Robotics Mastery, the 5-mana blue flash aura that makes 1/1 tokens. Then you get to the next pack, and I did roughly the same thing. I tried to take the best cards in the pack. I took a Favored Fighter, which is the 4-mana 4/4, makes a token, can only be blocked by 1 thing, and a Diligent Webkeepers. This is the Hybrid Selesnya uncommon. That's a 4/3, puts a counter on everything you control. Okay, so, now I've got green cards, which means I might not play the blue cards, but I'm still kind of feeling things out. I'm okay taking cards of different colors as long as I'm kind of in a shard, right? So if I start Bant, okay, so I can be blue-white or white-green. That's fine. Or I start Grixis, let's say. Maybe ideally not Grixis, because that's red-black in there. But you know what I mean, right? I don't mind taking a third color of card as long as it can help me kind of bob and weave between my other colors. Okay, so that's what happens, pick 2. Pick 3, I take a blue card and a green card, Unstable Experiment and a Favored Fighter. Pick 4, here's where you start to really go like, all right, this is a tense moment, because either I'm going to be confirming that, yeah, my colors are open enough and I can keep drafting it, or if I get to pick 4, pick 5, which is, pick 5 is the wheel, and there's like red-black cards in the pack, well, I have a pretty tough decision to make. Like, what do I do about that? We'll get to that in a second. But in this draft, I get a Dreadfang, 4th pick, which is the red, green, gold card, and a Perilous Lunge. So now I've got 3 green cards, or 4 green cards with the lunge I've just picked up. And this Dreadfang, I'm getting 4th pick. So I'm like, okay, maybe I can be green-red, heavy green, just a little bit of red, maybe splash this Remarkable Readings. And once you get to the wheel, which is, in this format, pack 1, pick 5, I really just kind of say, are there playable cards for me? Right? So I get to the wheel, I've got green, red, white, blue cards in the pile, and I pick up a Lively Leap, which is the single white mana trick, +2/+2, and Rhino's Rampage, which is the uncommon hybrid fight spell. And these are fine, right? Like, I'm breathing a sigh of relief here, going like, okay, these are at least playable, I'm fine, there are playable cards in the pack still. So this is an example of a success, right? You're like, okay, pack 1, take the good cards, pick 2, take the good cards, keep going, maybe kind of feel your way out in a shard. Once you get to the wheel, did you wheel any playable cards at all? If you do, I'm happy to say, okay, I'll roughly lock into this color. Maybe I splash, maybe I pivot from green-white to green-red, something along those lines, but I don't have to do a major pivot, right? The bad drafts, or the awkward drafts, are where you do get to the wheel, and to use this drafted example, maybe all the cards were red-black by the end. What do you do then? Well, it's tricky. I mean, if it's red-black exactly, I'm just like, okay, I'm just going to stay the course, draft whatever deck I'm drafting. But if it's like blue-black that's open or white-green, a deck that's actually good, I will pivot. Or at least like soft pivot, feel out a pivot. Be aware that I could/should pivot in this spot. I've also had drafts that are just like, well, I started green-white, and maybe green-white aren't that open, and the solution isn't pivot to black-red, which is the open deck, right? It's I get a little splashy, or after I'm done pack one, I kind of anticipate I will have to get a little splashy, pick up some power for some other colors, right? So that's how I've kind of felt the drafts have gone, right? Kind of that very clear template of once I get to the wheel, that's where I either lock in or figure out I have to do something else. As far as the 4-player aspect of things go, I mean, I don't think strategically you do anything differently, but it does just mean, you're seeing fewer different cards. It means that you care a little bit more about what you're getting past and what you do pass, right? I think one thing to say about this format is you can't force. It's just so difficult to force, like, blinders on, I'm going to be green-white, because there's just not enough people at the table fighting for other decks, right? In a normal format with 10 different decks, okay, somebody might have opened a good green-red rare and a blue-red uncommon, and you're like, okay, there's a bunch of different decks just kind of spreading out where you could force a deck and just be the only person in it. It's very unlikely that you can hard force a particular deck. But yeah, with this smaller card pool, fewer players at the table, more chunked draft decisions, I think you want to be very aware of how you want to progress through your draft after you get to the end of pack one. And then the very last section before we pack up is just a few cards I want to talk about that I didn't get to talk about other places. And this section is actually going to be a lot shorter than I expected. I covered most of the stuff I wanted to. So I have 2 cards here. 2 cards that are quite a bit better than they look, I'd say. So the first one here is Scout the City. 1 and a green for a sorcery. Either mill 3 cards, and you can take a permanent from among those, put into your hand, you gain 3 life, or destroy target creature with flying. So I don't really want this card in my like green-white aggro decks or red-green more aggressive decks. But if I am a slower green deck, maybe I'm splashing, maybe I am that black-green base deck. Actually really nice in black-green, because this is one of the few ways to put things in the graveyard. So you might care about that with some of your black cards. But yeah, just a good cantrip, filter card, the life gain's great, and then sometimes you kill a flyer. Like, by the way, I should say that, I should state that out loud, that I see this as a card selection card first, removal spell second. Like, I think the first mode is just pretty darn good. So just a note to that card, because it kind of looks kind of dorky, kind of sideboardy. And then the other card that I like playing, especially in my multicolor green decks, Ancestral Carvings. This is 3 mana for an artifact. When it enters, you look at the top 5 cards of your library, take 2 creatures from among those, put into your hand, and you can sack the carving for a mana to make a treasure token. I mean, kind of self-explanatory, right? Just like in your slower green decks, you want ways to gas up on action. You want the multicolor aspect of this card. I also think this card is like fine in a non-splish splashy deck, as long as your creature count is like 16, something like that. You got to make sure your hit rate's good for the card. But yeah, I've been fairly happy with it. Anyways, that is going to do it for our State of the Format Address episode today. Hope you enjoyed. And yeah, this is a very strange format, as I've been saying. I'm not sure exactly how much of it I'm going to cover. I've been enjoying myself, actually, quite a bit this week, but that's not uncommon for a week 1 for me. I also don't know how much people want content for this set or how much they're interested in it. Depth-wise, I mean, there's definitely some things I didn't talk about today, but I don't know how many weeks I'll be able to do 45 to an hour long minute episodes on this topic. So yeah, let me know what you think. Are you enjoying playing the format? If so, I'm happy to pump up more content. If not, we should focus on some broad level ups. I'm happy to do that too. In any case, if it's your first time here, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Consider a like, follow, subscribe, all that stuff. And we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.